moon was all faked.
Unless, of course, that this was a specially prepared batch of film by Kodak.
Well, we have spoken to Kodak about this, and we know that it's ordinary Ektachrome 160 ASA, as it used to be called in those days, film that anyone could buy. There was nothing special about it at all. It was 70mm film with sprockets.
There must have been something special about it, because we know that on the moon's surface the temperature is extreme. It's either very hot or very cold, and if it's very hot because we're allegedly in the sunlight, the temperature is about 200 degrees centigrade. It's about the temperature you'll cook your Christmas turkey at.
Yes, if I may just comment on the temperatures, on the transmissions, and I'd like to take this as the figure that we go with, on the transmissions they talk about it being 180 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
Okay, but that's in the sun. If you leave your film stock and your camera in the shade, it will go to minus 180 degrees. Now, you try putting your film stock in the freezer, if it'll go that cold, right, and try to wind it on in your camera, right, then you take it out and then you put it in the oven, right, and then you see how the emulsion gets very soft. It's also difficult to wind on without damaging the sprocket holes. Yet, if you look at Armstrong's roll of film, the majority of the pictures are all nicely exposed, and there are no problems with torn sprocket holes or the film becoming so brittle that it will break. None of those things have happened. It's not consistent with the pictures having been taken in that environment.
Now, Barry, what does NASA feel about these views? Are they honouring your views with an answer? Are they what are they saying?
I don't think NASA have commented yet. Quite how much of this information they're aware of, I'm not quite sure, but it would be nice to think that they could come forward and easily put a stop to some of this, because the photographic evidence in particular with these things like the hot spots of light, you can't deny that that is there on the photographs, and it just doesn't add up. And wouldn't it be very easy for somebody from NASA to step forward and say, well, the reason for that is because, and they come up with a simple answer. But with all of these books and articles that have been written, there's not one person has yet come back and been able to say, well, in actual fact, the reason for this is... They just haven't done it.
We phoned NASA to ask their opinion on this, and they said that they'd like you and everybody to know that the moon landings did take place.
I'm sure they would.
We'd sort of guessed that, pretty much so. It was somebody in public affairs.
Yes.
Are they likely to have said anything else?
Well, I mean, no.
Of course not.
No, they wouldn't.
They couldn't possibly come back and say, we've been spotted at last. Well done, chaps.
Sorry.
You know,
but these photographs
here.
are getting more and more well known now, and your views are getting more and more well known. You'd think that they would have commented or...
slightly differently. It's a sort of no comment, really, isn't it?
Andy, you believe that the astronauts did actually go to the moon?
I find it very hard to believe that we've never been to the moon, because it's not just the shots taken on the surface. Of course, there's lots of photographs taken in orbit or whatever. Now, I accept they could have been taken by unmanned probes, but what concerns me more is just the photographs. Putting aside everything else, the photographs clearly do not stand up to scrutiny. Now, I think, like Barry was saying, we deserve answers from NASA. Now, if these are just simply us being very, very silly, it would be the simplest thing in the world for NASA to come forward and say to us, well, this is why these pictures look like this, and it's as simple as that. Now, the fact that they've said nothing at all is very strange. But I differ from David here in terms of the whistleblower's theory, which says that there were deliberate anomalies put into the photographs so that 20, 30 years down the line we would discover them and realise it was a hoax. I actually believe it's just as likely to be down to incompetence, because nobody thought that anybody would ever question the photographs that deeply. And human nature being what it is, and who knows, maybe the hoax was conducted in a hurry or whatever, we don't know why they did it.
Certainly not.
Why do you think that?
Because the whole of the Apollo program goes back well before 1960s, and the space program, if you like, well before the 60s. So this is not something in a hurry. Now, the decision to do it will have been taken as soon as they knew that radiation is the biggest showstopper of the solar system, of our living
by the
thing,
Russians
which
as
is in
well.
1958. They knew that.
We've touched on the problems of radiation with the astronauts, but when we put this to a very well-known astronomer who runs a planetarium in England, we discussed what we've been talking about now, and within about 10 minutes he said, "We didn't go, did we?" Because We showed him a picture of the camera, and he said, what about the X-ray problem? Now, we all remember in the old days when we had these old-fashioned X-ray machines at airports,
You'd say,
they
don't
weren't
put your
film
camera
safe.
through.
And if you were a camera crew and you've been around the world going from country to country with your film rushes, as they're called, putting them through X-ray machine after X-ray machine, you could end up with your film being very badly fogged, which means it's not correctly exposed and will never look right.
And
Now,
these photographs are perfect.
No fogging.
how
any
do you
photo.
take pictures with X-rays all around you with no protection for the camera? Now, the official explanation as to why the X-rays didn't affect the film is that the camera is very well protected. It was painted with a coat of aluminium paint. This is the
Good, isn't
X-ray
it?
protection.
Ah.
And some experts have said, you mentioned, what about asking NASA, but we have asked contractors to NASA, and they said, well, it must have been all right, because look, the pictures are fine.
Was it Armstrong's voice that said one small step for man?
That's right.
Well,
But
we
well-
are told it's Armstrong's voice.
But do you think it was Armstrong's voice?
There's no reason why it
doesn't
shouldn't
make
be.
any difference whether it was or not, because he
There's
doesn't
no
have to have
reason
done it on the moon.
why it shouldn't.
Well, if we found out that it wasn't Armstrong's voice, then, you know, then...
Well,
then
he
we're
hasn't
getting
taken
somewhere.
a sound test on it, but that
This
doesn't
is,
matter.
again, work that can be done on analysing the sound.
Where were they, do you think, at this point? Where was this television studio?
Well, I don't think we should speculate as to where it was. I don't think it matters. It could be in the Nevada desert. It could be what they've been doing in Area 51. You know, if you have got a big moon set somewhere, that would be a reason why you wouldn't want people flying over it.
Spot all these
That's right.
things lying around.
Don't forget the Apollo 11 studio was a very small one because they were only on the surface for a few hours, and that could be inside. But once you get to Apollo 17, where there's a vast landscape, this has to be done outside, and you need a black sky, and therefore your exterior set would have to be done at night. One of the James Bond movies, doesn't really matter which one it is, it's a scene. James Bond walks into...
Moonraker.
It could have been Moonraker, but I don't think it was. James Bond walks into a particular lab.
Dr. No.
No, it's not Dr. No. No.
We'll get it in a
Not
minute.
Dr. No.
It'll come.
It was a very good try.
Really good.
It doesn't matter what the movie was, it's a James Bond movie, and people say, what's that scene doing in there? He walks into this lab, and they're going to the moon, and he says, I've come to inspect your radiation shields.
Yes, it does.
Okay? And the next thing he does, he walks out of the lab onto a moon set with astronauts pouncing around and phony backgrounds to it.
And a studio.
That's right, it's a
Love it.
complete studio.
I remember this
And he
scene.
ends up, being chased out of this set. So
Leaping
you have a
onto the rover
connection
and rushing off.
in a James Bond movie of a lunar set and a statement just prior to it that says, I've come to inspect your radiation shields. Now, isn't that interesting?
And these movies were made for a purpose then?
Well, certainly all movies made for a purpose. One is to entertain, two is to make a lot of money, or possibly the other way around. One is a product of the other.
But are
But
they also made for
Yeah.
a slightly more sinister purpose?
I don't think James Bond is made for a sinister purpose. I think we have possibly, there's a zeitgeist in artists that they're going to pick up the general energy of what's going on, and scriptwriters who are very close to the edge of things are going to incorporate into all work, as anybody does, painter, writer or whatever, their caring about things. And as you know, in repressive societies, you can get a lot said in fiction or in entertainment that you can't actually say straight out. And just because America is not labelled a communist society, it does not mean to say either that it's a democracy.
But in some cases, you can have a situation where things are done to confuse. And in the same way as you can drop in hints, as in the Bond movie we've just talked about, you've got a situation with Independence Day, which is incidentally about ETs, and I don't think
It's a
anybody
very, very
panicked
clever film.
when that film was released.
Well, that's because they weren't pretending it was actually happening.
There was a
Which
lot
they
of
did with the Orson Welles.
interesting,
Well,
confusing
the
information in
interesting,
it.
one of the interesting things about Independence Day is that they refer to Roswell,